Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Kingdom of Kush, the African empire that conquered Egypt. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In 747 BC, an African king named Piye marched his army north from what is now Sudan, and one by one, he defeated every ruler in Egypt. The most powerful civilization in the ancient world fell to a kingdom most people today have never heard of. For the next 100 years, black African pharaohs from the Kingdom of Kush ruled Egypt as its 25th dynasty, and they ruled it, by most accounts, better than it had been ruled in generations. The Kushites were not barbarian conquerors. They were deeply reverent of Egyptian tradition, restoring temples, reviving old religious practices, and portraying themselves in the most Egyptian terms possible. Piye's own victory stele, erected at the temple of Amun at Gebel Barkal, is one of the most detailed military accounts to survive from the ancient world. The Kingdom of Kush also built more pyramids than Egypt, over 200 of them, still standing in the Sudanese desert. It controlled the gold and iron that connected sub-Saharan Africa to the Mediterranean. It minted its own coins and developed its own script. So why does almost no one in the Western world know it existed? This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the broader phenomenon of lost civilizations, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The ocean has a long memory. As the last ice age ended around 12,000 years ago, sea levels worldwide rose by more than 120 meters, enough to drown entire coastal civilizations that may have flourished along shorelines that no longer exist. The continental shelves that now lie submerged beneath shallow coastal seas were once habitable land. River deltas, bays, and estuaries that today lie underwater were once the most attractive real estate on Earth, rich in resources, temperate in climate, and accessible by sea. If ancient peoples built their settlements where resources were most abundant, then much of the archaeological record of early civilization may be sitting on the ocean floor, invisible to conventional excavation. This is not speculation. Marine archaeologists have already found submerged ruins at dozens of locations worldwide, off the coasts of India, Japan, Cuba, and the Mediterranean islands. In some cases, these structures are clearly artificial: stone walls, carved steps, and rectilinear platforms that could not have formed naturally. The academic debate is not whether these structures exist, but what they mean. Were they built by unknown pre-flood cultures, or were they coastal settlements of known civilizations gradually abandoned as waters rose? The answer, in many cases, remains open. What oral traditions add to this picture is equally significant. Cultures living on or near the sea throughout the tropics and subtropics carry remarkably consistent flood narratives, stories of a great inundation that drowned an earlier world. These are not borrowed from one another through colonial contact. They predate European exploration. They appear to be independent memories of a shared catastrophe, the end of the last ice age, when the world coastlines changed forever and entire ways of life were drowned. The civilizations that built on those shores, if they existed, vanished beneath the waves. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades, and patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter, the core evidence surrounding the Kingdom of Kush. The African empire that conquered Egypt is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Kushite 25th dynasty ruled Egypt from approximately 747 BC, when King Piye defeated the fractured Egyptian rulers, until 656 BC, when the Assyrian Empire under Ashurbanipal drove the last Kushite pharaoh, Tantamani, out of Egypt. The dynasty lasted nearly a century and included 5 pharaohs, Piye, Shabaka, Shebet-Ku, Taharka, and Tantamani, all of whom ruled from a power base in Nubia while governing Egypt. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered Piye's victory stele, carved in Egyptian hieroglyphics and erected at Gebel Barkal around 720 BC, is one of the longest and most detailed military narratives from the ancient world. It describes Piye's campaign city by city, recording negotiations, sieges, submissions, and his piety toward Amun. Significantly, Piye was disgusted by the Egyptian princes who surrendered to him on the grounds that they were ritually impure. He considered himself the more proper Egyptian. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this. And that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine the Kingdom of Kush, with its later capital at Meroe in what is now central Sudan, built more than 200 pyramids, nearly 70 more than Egypt. The Meroitic pyramids are steeper and more slender than Egyptian ones, standing 20 to 30 meters tall. They were used as royal tombs from approximately 300 BC to 350 AD, spanning a period when no new royal pyramids were being built in Egypt. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Kush controlled the trade routes connecting sub-Saharan Africa to the Mediterranean world, serving as the primary conduit for gold, ivory, ebony, incense, and enslaved people moving northward. The city of Meroe was one of the ancient world's major iron smelting centers, and the slag heaps surrounding the site, still visible today, indicate iron production on an industrial scale that may have supplied tools and weapons across Northeast Africa. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of Pharaoh Taharka, who ruled 690-664 BC and is mentioned in the Bible in 2 Kings 19:9 as a king who came to Hezekiah's aid against the Assyrians, is considered by many historians the greatest Kushite ruler. He undertook major building programs across Egypt and Nubia, erected a colonnade at Karnak, still standing today, and fought the Assyrian Empire in a prolonged contest for control of the ancient Near East. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: the Meroitic script, developed around 300 BC, is one of the world's few undeciphered writing systems. Its alphabet was partially decoded in 1909 by Francis Llewellyn Griffith, who established letter values. However, the underlying language of the texts remains almost entirely unknown, meaning thousands of Meroitic inscriptions can be phonetically read but not semantically understood. The content of Kush's own written history remains locked away. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Kingdom of Kush, the African empire that conquered Egypt. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the mainstream scholarly position holds that Kush was an independent African civilization that developed its own complex culture, state structure, and religious tradition in dialogue, with but distinct from Egypt. Economic control of gold, iron, and trans-African trade routes provided the material basis for Kushite power. Its relative obscurity in Western history reflects the 19th and 20th century marginalization of African historical agency rather than any absence of evidence. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that some scholars argue that decipherment of the Meroitic language, currently one of archaeology's most significant open problems, could fundamentally transform our understanding of Kushite civilization. If Meroitic proves to be related to any known African language family, it could unlock thousands of texts covering Kushite religion, law, history, and literature. Attempts to connect it to Nubian languages, Nilo-Saharan families, and other candidates have so far not produced a working translation. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that Kushite economic power rested on control of gold production and the iron industry at Meroe. Gold from Nubian mines funded the Egyptian 25th dynasty's military campaigns and building programs. Iron smelting at Meroe may have enabled the southward spread of iron technology into sub-Saharan Africa. This economic interpretation, developed by scholars including Laszlo Turok, positions Kush as a primary engine of ancient African economic development rather than a peripheral Egyptian vassal. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree, that is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Kingdom of Kush, the African empire that conquered Egypt, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes Piye's victory stele, now in the Cairo Museum, provides primary source documentation of the Kushite conquest of Egypt in extraordinary detail. Additional royal stele from Gebel Barkal and Meroe record the reigns of subsequent Kushite rulers. The stele are inscribed in Egyptian hieroglyphics with increasingly Meroitic-influenced language over time, physically documenting the cultural evolution of the kingdom. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented the Meroitic pyramid field at Meroe, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is physically intact and archaeologically documented. Gold jewelry, bronze objects, iron tools, and imported Mediterranean goods recovered from pyramid tombs by excavators including George Reisner in the early 20th century are held in collections at the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, the British Museum, and the Sudanese National Museum in Khartoum. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed iron smelting slag heaps at Meroe, documented by archaeometallurgists including Nicolaas van der Merwe and others, confirm large-scale iron production beginning around 600 BC and continuing into the 4th century AD. Analysis of slag composition and furnace design indicates a sophisticated and sustained iron industry. The geographic distribution of similar smelting technologies across sub-Saharan Africa suggests Meroe may have been a point of origin or major transmission node for iron technology across the continent. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Kingdom of Kush, the African empire that conquered Egypt. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Sudanese archaeologists and scholars have worked to reclaim Kushite heritage as a cornerstone of Sudanese national identity. Ongoing excavations at Meroe, Napata, and Kerma continue to produce new findings. Progress on Meroitic decipherment, incremental but ongoing, represents the field's most significant open problem, with computational linguistics increasingly being applied to the corpus. Looting of Sudanese archaeological sites, accelerated by political instability, remains a severe threat. The relative absence of Kush from standard Western history curricula, despite its extraordinary record, reflects a bias that scholars have increasingly named and documented. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Kingdom of Kush, the African empire that conquered Egypt, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Kingdom of Kush ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.